People are obligated not to change, fake, or obfuscate what people say or said after the fact when they mention serious predicate acts or things. I'm not even a lawyer. WFSB attached me to fake conversations about the World Trade Center attack with people that were roles with use slash S of both the identities of America and of Saudi Arabia remotely, where and how the World Trade Center was involved with WFSB. It names next to them the difference of guilt roles with it. Because they, for example, they attached me to fake conversations with themselves. And the interbranch forged names and switched names, roles, evidences, roles, switching sequences, roles. For example, at the same time with the news, to prevent me voice, they're stacking fake things with people and their educators who attached me to fake ties, fake natures of ties to other students. They did this not just to me, but I can only speak about it relative to me. These people, the same ones involved before the World Trade Center attack. People I didn't know the names of. I found out a lot of the names. A former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, even neighbors of his co-defendants, Dominic Labriata, and their family members, John LeConte's family members, and their educators are increasingly people involved with various natures of predicate acts. At the schools I went, I didn't have classes with them. They plant fake exceptions, fake ties to me. Increasingly, there are a guy years apart. Then he tells he made a confession, a Delaware guy, about a probate court judge in his family, and he has rules with a Spada family. Both and a whole bunch of other probate judges and state police families interstates involved with whiting forensics. With the Bob Chase, his confessions with others regarding the name Christine, they don't even give the whole name. And Phil Cololo, he said that Phil Cololo was involved with a police report he wouldn't let me read. He's also recorded involved with people with the name Mendez and a whole bunch and other people went on off Fox Connecticut News involved with former director of the FBI, also Thaddeus Grabowski, one of the co-defendants of a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, right before a 2006 district court case in Connecticut. He was one of the names roles also with people all along Hangdog Lane and Two Rod Highway and conjunctions to it. Not just the Brown Turnpike before the heart of Hartford and Route 3, which also goes right by the state judicial branch offices, increasingly involved with the World Trade Center attack and the rules of wire crime acts and methods, whether the police and the courts. They just put in digital crime methods. Whiting forensics has increasingly rules. See, these are the forgiveness is because everyone left out and is only capable of leaving out how, what really caused negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And while pretending they could speak for practical reason or the science's names, or that body is sensed, even if they are a majority of people, even if they are everyone Black pupils. Our founders communicated to us clearer than day to get the Constitution unabridged and the breaching method that is assigned nature to communicate other than it communicates with Black pupils' whites of eyes, other than it communicates when nature is not only nature as criminal insidiousness. Our founders communicated for us to communicate how the breaching method propagated only capable of being overt criminal enterprises natures, like wrongdoers, mass wrongdoing itself, criminal enterprises themselves, private, overt criminal enterprises. The difference of that is used also because they are kept too. All sides of criminal and civil cases, even when those aren't in the cases, they are still involved with those same names. and the difference of it. These are the same people. This is a predicate acts with facts method /S, and delusions propagated, self-valued, self-cultivated. There are delusions that wouldn't be regarding black and white had not they been juxtaposed with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw quality aspects of fact-treatment nature, with the sciences individually grouped in together. Relativity is real. For example, so there one, but as I'm going to put one of the solutions up front before I show the evidence of why we're not going to have a solution proper at suits and ties nations and counters to it and exceptions without showing them how they are actually recorded, which is being and haven't been used remotely too. Their difference is self-valued as an array used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and see president/chief as cipher. Other is being and has been communicated for our founders and their roles with James Madison and his plan. And then George Washington agreed to help them. That's principle. That's the first thing. And with that, we're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. We were supposed to be honest about how George Washington did not have free speech. James Madison and our founders behind them did not have free speech because everyone's speech was measured and maintained. For example, I learned in notes at Central Connecticut State University that there were international meetings. And if someone was found out to have even hear someone, the laws were that if someone was found out that they heard someone speaking about building properties outside of that design, there were homes that were built before America's founders were even born. Outside of that design, they would hurt and torture that person just for hearing, because they heard someone talking about building other. They would hurt and torture and worse those people to keep everything internationally, suits and ties, counters, to keep now possessed, not just then. Clearer than day, sickly distinctly, the difference between the breaching method against colonists, Native Americans, and all exceptions. That was used more so by the breaching method than anyone else, where sophistication is relative. And the sophisticated people are A through Z. Now names A through Z are have been used as systems tactical terror from natures. And this breaching method knew that nature would increasingly demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures at all locations /S. The suburbs were designed tactically to nature to force humanity to have no means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures without relying more and more on the breaching method's roles with systems A through Z, making no any grouping of nations that comes, still entertaining locations, areas, and states. Even when they're admitting they're addressing the criminal city, leaving out the rest of it. In other words, the people speaking about crimes and with the prisons, they have roles of predicate acts with facts methods. They have roles with the word corrections. They have a building of corrections, for example, in Connecticut, at the town line of Hartford, Connecticut, and Wethersfield, Connecticut, where, for example, they have other communicated for our founders again. And these are the founding locations. So we have problems, and the reason we have problems at campuses, and when they make money allotments and take subjects up, this breaching method, measured and maintained, perfected before our founders were born, roles blaming nature's demonstrations of the republic for which we stand and its campuses system having been abridged. There are proofs that it's more practical even to theorize, let alone to convict. In other words, that pantheism was originally about there's a distinct identity of hyper and simultaneous nature that comes not with any other identity, but as it anyway. It is why we have two eyes, and other species' bodies are a totally different species, but they also have two eyes. Because there's a further identity of simultaneous nature relative to the perception here in the answers, the substance of the answers, which is the substance of the revelations, because this is where they come from, nature itself. Natural law is real. The predicate is valued to English, while the predicate act is valued to the law, where the sciences share an identity, and where they appear and where and how they appear not to. In other words, where they have the distinct identities. That comes also with demonstration of how nature is hyper-additional nature. Being the same identity with parts of itself that it values distinctly. And that way there, the parts of the hyper-simultaneous that are being valued distinctly, it increases the value of the other parts. And we are only increasing identity of volume one way. And this is how English was really revealed to be taught. My high school algebra teacher individually communicated to me that she was criminal insidious in this nature and that she was going to pretend other by repeating about the sexual relations with a little girl that grew up next to me. I never even met her. And about and about the religion, bringing the religion into it, Jewish. And her sources are increasingly involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, first. And there are black and white women judges involved with KKK, black themed, Latino themed, Italian themed, a whole bunch of the differences rackets, the same ones involved with, they forced Saudis to collusions with them. Weathersfield police recorded confessed demonstration. A whole bunch of people tied to the name Cololo, like a Phil Cololo. And involved with it, and people with the name Scalora. There's a guy who forced himself through my door. I didn't respond to him. So where anything he says, I said he's fake. He brought the name Scalora to make it look like I know him. He's one of the ones all along, like Maple Avenue and Franklin Avenue. I've never seen him there. But people tied to their roles, intercities next to campuses. He has roles with the principal child defender before he was caught forcing them. And these are people with the World Trade Center predicate acts roles. And they forced Saudis to collusions with them. And Saudi attackers forced them to collusions with them because there was an extra involved, including with the coalition, including the relativity of where they have long-term logistical, insights, knowledge of good and evil. For example, the sources of Judge Napolitano brought to this as well, because they won't get onto paper into branch. And part of my evidence is that and how they've been attaching me to fake and changed communications with everyone around me, including my family since I was a kid, including with WFSB. And about the World Trade Center, while I caught them at the same time with a child defender leader of kids, and more with the name O'Brien, involved with Sandy Hook campuses, including a prison there, with foreign and domestic medical families too, involved with crimes with a serial killer and the body dumping spot reported. But that serial killer too, his doctors and his prison captors also had time collusions with the names next to there as the ones I caught recorded roles, forcing the principal child offender and news identity theft, fraud, slanders, also with the sources at corners of streets planting evidences. Increasingly, probate judges have roles at elderly homes where they have roles with drugs and the effects of them that are used to keep everyone's mouth shut, and the nature of crime that is criminal insidiousness since founding relative to this, how they could get away with debating anyone. No, not legitimately debating anyone regarding all the ways we could discern The voices of the sciences are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, a certain type of victim slash hyper victim. The differences between them being more guilty, the overt criminal enterprise is private, or the names A through Z. One is obligated not to change, fake, or obfuscate what people say. In other words, when they mention child abuse acts and fake conversations and fake digital evidences, look around. When has there been an identity of the law not associated with worse than criminal incompetence that pretends that into science spoke for those people in New York City? When you see those pictures on YouTube and in the news from the distance looking at the cities, all those people need food and none of them can grow food. The suburbs are designed for this. The difference between how the people in the suburbs or the cities need food, it's non-existent. It just, that's why it's a theater. That's why it's important how in America, in Russia, and in Ukraine, the suburbs were designed by that which was in here, even if they were here before, even if there were countries before America was, through America's founding. They right in our faces, they measured and maintained people that would use the knowledge of good and evil to get over on what is actually recorded and changing and self-by rule, changing what our founders communicated. Then they want to have us, they want to question us and have some presentation of American history. They're keeping fights going and keeping blame. Roles too are a multi-front needed by the breaching method at countries A through Z to keep other things other than themselves blamed. Not just for not just for the breaching method, but nature itself shows us a breaching method is one of the things that we could discern. True always, even if it was made up. That witch trials were about. That same breaching method that was entrenched at the time, northern colonies and southern colonies, with slavery. And even those overall things like that are changed, faked, and obfuscated, how they actually were. It wasn't just England, North and South. It wasn't just the countries and the companies involved, entrenched with those crazy fact-cheating nature, therefore physically slavery laws against every individual difference, every individual, every name. Sickly distinctly, too, because it used how sickly non-distinctly was, it is left out. It uses how it is still left out when people are speaking for sciences or integrity. It is measured and maintained speech as criminal insidiousness nature, for how nature generates that. See, we have been systems tactical ulterior from the hyper-native one. That shows us Native Americans are 1/3 of America's founders. Those founders behind it as James Madison and his plan. That is the second third of our founders. And the rest of our founders, they had to be counter-extorted. And George Washington belongs to all three groups. If not, it comes down to how, in other words, the importance of how and why we're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. We're supposed to be honest about the torture method against every single person. We're supposed to be honest about the fact-cheating nature slavery method, therefore physical slavery method against every single person. A method /S. Not just as the law /S, but as a breaching method for a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise breaching method is more, in other words, is plausible. I mean, there are means for us to charge an anti-hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise as countries that have been charging each other with war crimes and with, criminal enterprise, transnational collusions, and things like that. Everyone, this breaching method knew that they would not know how to speak for and they'll make sides of things as collusions with itself, with its needs at all locations, areas, and states everywhere the human species body has a body, a name. It is and has been through systems individually, grouped, and simultaneously, like voicings for humanity, through an system's tactical interior, from the one that uses how species are distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneously for what is further hyper-simultaneous to demonstrate to us. They measure and maintain, for example, differences brackets. Like, for example, if a Muslim girl doesn't want to wear a hijab, they kept that going so long. The beginning of the Old Testament, the beginning of Old Testament and the Quran, they have parts, for example, where they are read, in other words, they dictate how to read those books, but no one allows that even realized, because then they won't be able to pretend they won't be able to use their knowledge of good and evil about those books to cover up how they are about self-valued rules with sequence shifts, with uses of difference of names, of convictions, in ways that are incapable of defending themselves and not self-valuing, quality aspects in nature left over only because of that breaching methods possession over not just campuses A through Z, but of the differences of them too, through you guys too, because that's the plural part. The breaching method knew that nature is going to continually demonstrate to us one of the things true always that is causing and caused originally all kinds of negative value nature progressions, acts in nature was the human fact, human nature breaching method. The same one that knew that it could force, trick, hurt, and persuade people to call it racism. It had already sustained roles with the differences between countries A through Z with it, industries with it, overt criminal insidiousness natures with it, private ones. The insidiousness of people A through Z, remember, subject treatments. They contain too quality aspects in nature that can't defend themselves and afford to discern what is capable of being discerned. Forgiveness is because this all changes when we give everyone the same thing to blame it on and it's not making it up. Even if there's not there's that method. It showed all identities of sophistication. The only way, non-sophistication, the difference of that. The only way it can survive is to keep, this is how the black people's rights of eyes is left out from American history. Natural law. Nature itself is communicating to us. Natural law is real. See, but nature speaks about order. And nature is about order, tactically ulterior than the people who are formally and informally speak on order. You can't afford the hyper-forensic trail to be discerned as it actually unfolded through the years. You individuals of this human species volume individually grouped it together, and or your body was sensed. Even if it was a majority of people, even if it was everyone. Even if it becomes a majority of people speaking against racism, defenses of that is defenses as collusions, keeping other things others ourselves blamed for that preaching method. It is the one that forced and sustained roles, everyone hurting each other. Everyone helping each other as collusions too. With collusions, for example, keeping the quality of fact, human nature at all formal locations of law, all private ones, and all other locations using those differences to force, check, hurt, and persuade. Finite details, fake and change. Sequence shift, self-value. Active group. In other words, and things that would hurt people in themselves in the future. Self-value. Because this is running through treatments of all subjects. So I don't know what President Biden what his theme is, if he has a theme. President/Chief Obama had change. And President/Chief Trump has has same for Obama. But his is Make America Great Again. It's also America First. But this is also where, while they are fighting with each other, the Democrats and Republicans, they're forced to use styles of fighting, arguing with fact treatments that is forced, checked, hurt, and persuaded. Also to self-value, even though they don't self-value, and the difference of that. In other words, how locations, areas, and states. One of the things that where everyone hurts each other is when you agree to pretend it's even debatable. That like things about economics and resources. In other words, the subject treatments individually grouped together. They contain quality aspects in nature, relative to where and to how. People need to have others they could reach out to syntactically. And this is also why we need to make people not rely on, so we help this. Yeah, we're supposed to help people, but we're supposed to make that help with everything we have as a group, including as the group as an entire species together. We have to understand that and how many people in our countries that have the suburbs rely upon food from other locations because they can't grow it. This has been tactically denatured too long. Worms used to come out of the earth in the rain and walk into bodies of water that are no longer there, or there's no life in them if they are there. But they walk into the water because the bugs are no longer landing on the surface of the water. But now worms are coming out of nowhere into the water for the fish to eat. Bugs are no longer in the air. They're harder to find by the birds. But now the birds had a supply of worms. And nature is constantly communicating to us. And not just communicating to us. It is showing us it is a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible that comes with the invisible but still discernible parts of speech, not just of English. And English was revealed, self-valuing the differences of the other languages, because we're looking for the hyper-difference. We are capable of being led by that which is true always, not denying the slightest sequence shifts. In other words, not denying the validity of any nature of exception. This is how the mind and reason works. How, you stupid jerks, where courage and strength are important. Like not changing or faking what people say or motivations for it. Even though to extent you guys don't even realize it, because there was hyper-evidential. Just having black pupils and whites of eyes, which are the same color eyes at the same time, per nature's hyper-simultaneous, projecting this. And we have exceptions, exception nature. Sometimes we have the same color eyes too. In other words, except we have different colored eyes. In other words, with the halo part. And nature wants us to be following these observations, these revelations that come from it too, because it's following its identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. Not by accident, exactly what you are doing being you. This is the course of every identity, even one made up. Even if you make something up, every finite part of itself has 1/3/5 identities of possession over it. And then further distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously, /hyper-simultaneously, the group parts of it. And the simultaneous parts of it. Nature itself, the natural law, is showing us that to appreciate species volumes as a sequence/simultaneous nature, sequence/simultaneous nature, and as a simultaneous nature/sequence nature. We're all supposed to put our countries first. And we're supposed to make sure there's not the slightest exception being exploited. Because we're supposed to make sure we're not being used as systems tactical terror. From the one that's true all ways that can answer our questions. So we're going to examine too, Strunk and White. We're going to examine books that are like for example, Strunk and White says that good writing is vigorous and concise, but it doesn't make distinctions properly, and there is collusions with criminal insidiousness natures of uses of all locations / and then further with our databases, and further at campuses. For example, the syntax nature of a guy I had for critical thinking in a communications degree. I did a double major in English and communications. He brought up twice, because I took a class over again too. Not because I thought he was a good teacher. These are people that were involved before the World Trade Center attack, with people intercities from campuses I went, who were involved with what I know how to explain and have other people understand too, were predicate acts with facts, methods, roles, and souls as criminal insidiousness natures, as identity theft, fraud, slanders natures. The Department of Corrections, note that name, because this is associated with the prisons. There's a prison in Sandy Hook. I believe that's referred to as a campus too. But how recently there was a fire department guy who was hit by a car and killed in Sandy Hook, Newtown, reportedly. And there are fire department people. There are people, I don't know all their names. Some of the people's names are Kerr, DeMoro, and Cololo. And Dominic Abate, and others associated with the corner of Southstein Highway and Town Line Drive. And there was a report of someone was reportedly stabbed at a hotel, and then there was arrest at a gas station near there. Those businesses have roles with judges and prosecutors and foreign and domestic medical families tied to them, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with their educators too through time. And inter-services, like Marines are involved too. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and with their locations. Also, there is an officer, Jerry Miller, and Weathersfield Police Facebook page They have rules planting evidences on all sides of my house, increasingly with people tied to this Miss Riley. And Mike DeMaine is involved as one of the ones next to Fox Connecticut News with people associated with Thaddeus Grabowski, knowingly or not. There, like the timing of it, Allison Mulcahy, with the syntax and nature of Thaddeus Grabowski, right before the Connecticut District Court case in New Haven, Connecticut. But this was in Hartford, Connecticut, right outside of Fox Connecticut News. The difference between predicate acts there, or the names with roles of predicate acts and predicate acts with facts methods at the buildings next to it, or on the street there. There are Mendes police and ones with the name DeMaine. And there are people with Mulcahy that they confessed and recorded to and demonstrated to, involved with them along Two Route Highway and Hangdog Lane with intelligence families. Increasingly, there's a Jennifer Kennepicky involved with people along that street. I don't know either too. And a Kevin Dillon, a Thomas Dillon, and Anna Dillon are increasingly involved with people at Hartford Hospital with medical and sexual offenders of kids, including judges and their family members involved. Probate court judges are involved with mental health parts, mental evaluations. They've been roles speaking fake things into records, and others have been just fabricating whole conversations and fake ties to people because they're in locations where no one's watching. They have roles with various police forms in their defendant capacities too, like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. They are increasingly involved with people at Central Connecticut State University, involved with predicate acts. Also, like I'm not even being allowed to address because there's too many things at once they brought up. They won't even get on paper for any of those things. That's why we need to have a Who Disbelieves Act. In other words, they already painted themselves in corners. They blamed on other things, others themselves. And the difference between who was guilty, that's also has been used remotely. This breaching method perfected them. See how their narratives and natures regarding which trials are about, leaving out where our founders communicated about the breaching method, leaving out appreciating the value of those laws, the difference of their guilt or the people that came before them. In other words, their roles keeping the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures from off all locations, especially those most hurt by it. And like that, as a species, by as long as we're doing it together, A through Z, and there are proofs that there's in other words, even if it's just being played, that method is still there, and others where I'll show it to keep that quality of fact achieving nature, criminal insidiousness / hyper criminal insidiousness. That's in other words, we can observe how and why. Really, the relativity, note it as relativity too, of us having projected by nature itself. We have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. So we can discern at hyper invisible, but still discernible. Hyper conjunction to all parts of invisible, but still discernible speech. See the word, the phrase, and the clause. Those 3 volumes, distinct, non-distinct. In the relativity to the sentence as a clause being used as an independent clause or as a subordinated clause. And the subordination itself is not what's negative. We are small. We are, in other words, even Earth itself is small while it is large. See, Earth has a special difference, but it is being forced from here. As nature demonstrates, we are hyper-native, and we have been using systems other than that hyper-native. President/chief, they're not supposed to be compatible volumes, but that's supposed to be hyper-positive. Otherwise, we're supposed to sense. The same way, too. We're supposed to sense names A through Z of the human species body. In other words, if we're on the same planet at the same time, in other words, I'll donate a species coach to make means out of nowhere to the countries with nuclear weapons. And then, in other words, it will make it a virtual thing. And we'll make it go with the pantheism. We'll hand it out to the world, and we'll help the world, help the individuals. So every individual, including individual leaders, every individual voice is forced to entertain how individual difference, group difference, and humanity voicings having been through systems tactical terror. So that forces quality aspects, nature styles. In other words, I don't want to give away too much of the programming, but this is also a programming method that is a virtual production studio. And there's a more proper way of teaching history, of understanding, observing history. In other words, for example, Boolean logic, debates regarding that. And if it's more, in other words, and we're going to hear something, I'll say something debatable. It is more probable and is more practical to theorize, let alone to theorize that yin yang and alpha and omega were revealed to be taught together about the difference between what is variable and constant as value. And this is not just nature showing us. Physics, invisible but still discernible, and hyper-invisible but still discernible are connected as a quality of diffusion. Physics, metaphysics, and identity are inside this. Just like the little parts of your body are inside your complete bodies, simultaneously greater than and more finite than. Identity of relativity, to, from, as, with, and for them. One identity is coming not just to, from, as, with, and for all things, but that way to the smallest finite detail of them. That way to the group details of them. That way to the simultaneous value of them. Humanity. All right. But this way, in other words, I'm not even a lawyer. I can record and show you. Anyway, so in other words, if you mention acts, a whole bunch of things are brought up at once: murders, untimely deaths. Don't forget, we're clearer than day. We could discern the identities of law had roles of predicate acts with facts methods, with all kinds of evidences, racketeering natures, all kinds of collusions with the bodies tied to them, like the prisons at Sandy Hook, associated with people with the name O'Brien, further involved with other natures of organized crime, with forced child abusers, leaders of the kids, and the ones further involved with the judges and prosecutors and doctors personally and professionally involved with that, and the whole bunch of other countries and criminal enterprises at the same time, they brought it up. In other words, but I want to focus on the little predicate acts, like the fake conversations with me that WFSB pretended. So then I have to ask someone, because I can't get them onto writing. And they put me in fake conversations with people more and more, intercities, the same ones involved. at corners of streets in Wethersfield too, and with the news. So they're totally identity theft, fraud, slanders, and they're pretending others simultaneously. We're going to examine this as criminal insidiousness slash hyper criminal insidiousness. We're going to examine how they pretend they could speak for law or sciences, having left out the black pupils. For example, that such thing, so principle. They're going to speak about principles anyway. In many vaccines. Please, Judge Napolitano, do what's right and get the Wethersfield into branch onto paper, one name and sequence. And with the news, I want the news on paper too. And with the interbranch, in other words, New Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, their family members are involved. Connecticut's District Court, all sides of cases in the courts themselves, the same ones that were involved with the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center attack that day, the night before it, and since, leading up to it too, long term and short term. Those are ones that have been roles of predicate acts of facts, nature's timed identity theft, fraud, slanders roles. Let's get them onto paper. So, vaccines. I teach those things, but long. So don't forget, it's intercity, in other words. Since they were kids, they're educators too. In other words, there's a whole bunch of people tied to a Mr. Neville. In other words, putting fake things in databases and with ones I don't even know the names of. And the different departments individually grouped together. Recorded clearer than day how they're used remotely, could be for influence. Know how the identity of law values a predicate act as a means, for example, to discern a criminal insidiousness nature. Know how the English speaker values a predicate as a means to discern a main verb. Know how the verbs need more than one name. I'll train. I teach it best, vaccines. I teach those things, but long, since them ancient times. There is a scam upon your minds. Attend. Forgiveness is to stay focused. Don't change or fake what I say. Don't obfuscate what I say. Get me from the paid conversations about the World Trade Center, and I want a response for the confessions of the principal child offender I caught first. And I want a response for the police switching and forging names with that. And I want a response why they didn't, the Wethersfield police switching and forging names, what they're doing with their kids at the Rocky Hill schools. The rest of the names involved. I want them on paper now. I want the ones with the security too, their family members. See them tied to the shopping centers and malls. Get them on paper. Don't play games. Don't leak. In other words. So it's clear too. In other words, they're refusing to identify themselves. In other words, get them on paper. A whole bunch of things are brought up at once. You guys understand that. They put me in fake conversations. They won't identify themselves legitimately interbranch through time. A whole bunch of different instances. It's not just against me, but I can only speak for me, myself. In other words, they're putting, I'm going to show you, you're going to see all kinds of predicate acts and facts, methods, whole methods. That's what we're going to see when we value. And we hold on to this value. We're not going to let go. We're not going to leave out how we have black people's whites of eyes. It means superior right through that fake eyes of integrity, of the sciences, of the names of law, having left this out. Forgiveness is not to blame anyone, even when correctly leaving out the breaching method, because it was right here with roles. So you're going to see. You're going to see.